Please join me. Let us share the prayer that Jesus taught us all, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Please bow our heads. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before Thee at this time to give Thee thanks for this day, this opportunity to meet together, to partake of this ceremony that we might be able to remember those valiant and brave men and women who responded to provide service to those that were in need at this day and that were suffered and lost their lives, that we might remember them, that we might give them thanks for all the service that they provided. And we pray that Thou would be with us, that we would continue to remember these individuals as we go about our lives, that we would never forget the lessons that Thou would have us learn with this experience, and pray that Thou would be with us, that those that are here, those that will not be here today, that we might be also always mindful of Thee in all that we do. And we pray for this humbly in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I was going to ask all of our veterans to come forward and join me right here in front of the stage, if we could, please. All the veterans. And, sir, thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause for all of our veterans. These are the guys who have really delivered for us over the years, and these are my heroes. We have with us my grandson, Michael, and he was going to get started with this little group of kids, if I may. I was going to ask all the men to uncover. If you would, please. Veterans may salute. We're going to face the flag of the United States of America. Uncover, and if you're a veteran, you may salute. Otherwise, hand over the heart if we may, please. Michael?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you so much. And veterans, thank you for your service. Thank you for being up here with us. Thank you, sir.
If you all remain standing for the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you for standing during our national anthem and rendering the respect and gratitude to those men and women and their families who are from all races, religions, sexual orientation, and ethnic groups who stood up and fought for all Americans, many paying the ultimate sacrifice so that we, all Americans can continue to enjoy the freedoms that are the envy of most nations. Our flag draped on the coffins of our fallen heroes and proudly displayed on the grave sites symbolizes the price they paid. Standing in respect and honoring them and their families during our national anthem seems like a very small price to pay for the service and sacrifice they provided us.
At this time of year, all it takes is a weather report mentioning the possibility of severe storms to set my nerves on edge. The darkening sky of a late summer storm leads me back to how I came to the Midwest 15 years ago. On a bright Tuesday morning in September, I stood waiting for a subway train in Brooklyn, New York. The train car was more packed than usual because it was a mayoral election day and the first day of school in the city that never sleeps. I rode the local as I always had throughout a lifetime of commuting. Its many stops afforded me the opportunity to get off the train if I had to. Years ago, as a young worker, I suffered from panic attacks. Living in a city of 8 million people will do that to you. They were always the bread and circus of the morning commute. I witnessed my fair share of humanity acting badly in the AM. There were chronic delays, blackouts, flooded train tracks, fights over seats, aggressive panhandlers, muggings, people using the subway cars as toilets. One time I even saw someone roll a brass bed complete with mattress, pillow, and blanket onto a packed car. As the years passed, my anxiety subsided. I had become numb to my surroundings. I found that I still felt better riding on the slow-going local than the sardine-packed express. The familiar was comforting. I saw the same people every day on the train and lived through the changing seasons and fashions, the delays, the cancellations, the ups and downs of an average lifetime. I was a native New Yorker, and I spent that lifetime at the same job, working for a magazine. The magazine was housed in a new office building in Midtown Manhattan on Times Square. Sleek as the fashion lifestyle magazines it housed, my walk from the subway was just a quick run across the street at the center of the world. And that bright Tuesday morning in September was going to set into motion a series of events that still reverberate today. By noon, my life in the world I lived in would be utterly changed. Only I didn't know it then. I only cared about getting to the office and doing my daily tasks. I wore a set of invisible blinders that we all seem to wear to get through life. I had been one of the few to get to the office early that day, and I took a moment to glance at the daily newspapers. In a while, there'd be a large delivery of mail, and the day would officially begin. Halfway through reading about election odds in the World Series, a messenger had come up from the basement with a mail cart. The young man asked if I had heard about a small plane crashing into World Trade Center. I turned from his gaze and rushed to the windows that faced downtown. I saw a huge fire in one tower. I knew it could not have been made by a small plane. Fellow employees started to arrive, and a few of us gathered in a conference room that had a television. We watched news reporters trying to outguess each other about what had just happened when a jet slammed into the adjacent tower. I had a sinking feeling that it wasn't by accident. A coworker and I ran to an office where people were using binoculars and a telescope to get a better look. The nightmarish sight of people jumping to their deaths from a blazing 100-plus story skyscraper curdled my blood. We zombie-like voyeurs watched helplessly as people waved shirts and held handkerchiefs to their faces as flames and black smoke engulfed them. Some fell alone. I saw a man and woman leap hand in hand into eternity. He was wearing a suit and tie, and she wore a sleeveless blouse with a skirt. I could no longer watch death's aerial ballet. Rumors started fast. There were other planes in the air headed for Midtown. I ran down 21 flights. No one knew what to expect as we exited onto the street. Midtown Manhattan was awash in people, in little groups. Transit had commandeered the emergency services. Whole subway and bus lines had closed down. I wanted to get home. My home was in Brooklyn, and that seemed like a million miles away. I headed toward Fifth Avenue, thinking I could get downtown and reach the Brooklyn Bridge for that long walk home. That way home took on a surreal tinge. The sun was shining as lower Manhattan became shrouded in a smoky haze. Many people seemed unaware of the day's events, even as police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks screamed by. Excuse me. separate realities for a city of separate realities. I kept plodding on, picking up bits of disinformation along the way, like Los Angeles had been attacked, that Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Boston had also faced the same fate. London, Paris, Rome, and Moscow were destroyed. The world had gone mad on a beautiful September morning. With an end-time scenario playing in my head, I got further downtown past the Williamsburg Bridge and the Manhattan Bridges. They were both closed for the emergency vehicle use. The air around Chinatown was heavy with smoke and dust. I pulled my collar up to my nose. By the time I reached the Brooklyn Bridge, there was no way for me to get near it. Thousands of my fellow New Yorkers were streaming across from several directions. I started to notice people covered in fine ash. Some were bleeding from wounds to their heads or other extremities. The police did what they could to direct the crowds. Cops were telling people to try to get back uptown or try to go to the west side. There were boats and ferries for people to get to New Jersey and Staten Island. No one ever thought those buildings would collapse. I made the wrong choice that day. One of my brothers lived in Staten Island, and since my way to Brooklyn was blocked, maybe I could get to his house somehow. Behind Vesey Street, I met my personal Waterloo. As I walked in the debris of the day, paper bags of fast food and cast-aside shoes, I stepped on something and looked down and saw the pitiful sight of a severed hand still wearing a wristwatch. The shock of what I had seen left me standing in a fugue state until a cop yelled inches from my ear, "It's just a pigeon, lady." His next words to me were, "Run now," as a 100-story tall tornado of ash and cement bore down on top of us. Blackness, what death's embrace must be like. A deafening silence, a wheezing shock brought back to consciousness. It was over. I walked back uptown. I wound up walking across the Williamsburg Bridge that day, and no sooner had my foot hit the roadbed when the rest of the World Trade Center convulsed into a modern-day Vesuvius, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I made it back to my apartment, covered in the cremains of ordinary, everyday New Yorkers. People who made bets on the World Series, gossiped at water coolers, read tabloids, took their kids to the first day of school. Those who loved and were loved from all age groups, backgrounds, professions, creeds, religions. I've gone back over the years to the place that changed everything for me. I'm a stranger in that proverbial strange land. The Cortlandt Street subway station runs under the new World Trade Center site. It has undergone a major redo, a design of stark white with sharp architectural shapes that soar to the ceiling, give the feeling of being inside the body of a whale. As a weary Jonah, I leave the whale's mouth onto Vesey Street and tread the familiar and the unfamiliar on my way to the reflecting pools that now mark Ground Zero. Pokemon hunters have replaced the teams of first responders in hard hats. 15 years later, late summer storms lead me back to how I came to the Midwest, my nerves on edge.
I'm just trying to be a father, raise a daughter and a son, be a lover to their mother, everything to everyone. Up and at 'em bright and early, I'm all business in my suit. Yeah, I'm dressed up for success, from my head down to my boots. I don't do it for the money, there's bills that I can't pay. I don't do it for the glory, I just do it anyway. Providing for our futures, my responsibility. Yeah, I'm real good under pressure, being all that I can be. I can't call in sick on Monday when the weekend's been too strong. I just work straight through the holidays, sometimes all night long. You can bet that I stand ready when the wolf growls at the door. Hey, I'm solid, hey, I'm steady, and I'm true down to the core. And I will always do my duty, no matter what the price. I've counted up the cost, I know the sacrifice. Oh, and I don't want to die for you, But if dying's after me, I'll bear that cross with honor, 'cause freedom don't come free. I'm an American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I'll always do what's right. I'm out here on the front line, sleep in peace tonight. American soldier, I'm an American soldier. Yeah, an American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I'll always do what's right. I'm out here on the front line, sleep in peace tonight. American soldier, I'm an American, an American, an American soldier.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of my colleagues on the Battle Creek City Commission, thank you. Thank you all for being here to commemorate and remember that fateful day and the lives of our fellow citizens who were lost. Being in New York shortly after the attack, what I saw is forever embedded in my mind, and it remains as a painful memory yet today. Today, however, as we honor those victims of 9/11 and the trauma of our country that continues today, 15 years later, I ask you to also remember another fateful day in our country's history. December 7th, 1941, when the U.S. Pacific Fleet was attacked in 7 hours of coordinated attacks on our country, which led to the entry of the United States into World War II in the Pacific and the European theaters. 2,403 Americans were killed. 1,178 were wounded. 8 U.S. battleships were damaged. 4 sunk, taking with them American servicemen. Many of those men are still entombed in the USS Arizona, which lies today at the bottom of the harbor. I mention this for 2 reasons. This year marks the 75th anniversary of this attack on the United States. As a member of the United States Navy League, we have consistently held services to commemorate that day in our nation's history. Sadly, incredibly sadly, as we pay tribute to those brave souls not who lost their lives on that day, but to the greatest generation of this country, less than a handful of citizens attend. And secondly, it is my hope that this event and the memory of those lost on September 11th does not meet the same fate as remembering those lost at Pearl Harbor and the many other attacks on our country. We do not teach in our schools the history of this country and those individuals, both servicemen and women, who have been lost in the defense of this great nation. We tend to be more concerned of the constitutional right to not pay tribute to this country by honoring our flag, by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and by the singing of the national anthem. I have no respect for anyone, constitutional right or not, who do not appreciate and respect this country and what it has to offer. And folks, that's my constitutional right. So thank you very much to Sherry Swan, Gordon Rosberg for working so hard to bring this commemoration to this community in remembrance of those lost on September 11th, 2001. Thank you for coming, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Although one would love to forget the tragedies of 9/11, one must never forget the loss of those innocent victims just doing their job on 9/11, 2001, as well as those who volunteered to go in harm's way to protect and prevent others from being victims of these terrible acts. Remembering is important. Please welcome to the podium a seasoned and professional firefighter, the Battle Creek Fire Chief David Schmutz, and the first responder Lindsey Jones, who will remember all the firemen and first responders with the last alarm.
Just as the wreath is associated with the memorial service, the life of a firefighter is closely associated with the ringing of the bell. At this time, we ask all uniformed personnel to please rise. As the firefighter begins his hours of duty, it is the bell that starts it off. And so through the day and night, each alarm is sounded by a bell, which calls the firefighter to fight fires and to place his life in jeopardy for the good of his fellow man. And when the fire is out and the alarm has come to an end, the bell rings 3 times to signal the end. In memory of the 343 fallen firefighters on September 11th, 2001, their duties complete, and admirably so, the bell rings its final 3 times for them.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by saying what an honor and privilege it is to be standing in front of you all today. To be asked to represent the fire service and share my thoughts on the events of 9/11 is extremely humbling. You see, Tuesday, September 11, 2001, is the day that the fire service suffered its greatest loss in history. Of the nearly 3,000 people that lost their lives that day, 343 of them were firefighters. They were everyday people who were committed themselves to put their own personal safety above others. I have watched the documentaries of the attacks numerous times over the last 15 years. Each time it brings out different emotions for me, but nothing will ever compare to what I felt standing at the 9/11 memorial with Battalion Chief Mike Fleischer this past April. See, we were in New York to pick up a piece of the World Trade Center to bring back to Battle Creek. We finally reached New York and it was getting dark. We got checked into our hotel, jumped onto the subway, and headed down to the memorial. By the time we had arrived at the site, it was dark, and the only thing that were lit up were the pools. As we approached, it was eerily quiet. When I reached the pool, I finally realized where I was and that I was standing on hallowed ground. I was standing in the spot that so many people had lost their lives, and my thoughts drifted to the images that were burned into my memory. Millions of tons of steel had crashed down right where I had stood. It raised many emotions, and my thoughts drifted again to my friend Dennis O'Connell, who was an NYPD police officer and was at Ground Zero. As the towers collapsed, Dennis was able to dive under the car. It shielded him from many debris. That in itself is amazing, but under that car, for whatever reason, was an SCBA. For those that don't know what an SCBA is, it is the tanks that firefighters wear on their backs when we fight fire. Dennis was able to put on that tank, which allowed him to breathe the clean air. Why that SCBA appeared under that car at that time still is a mystery, but I can only think that God wasn't ready to take Dennis home. And when I called his wife the next day to get the news, you could tell in her voice how thankful she was and that Dennis was so safe. I also thought about another friend of mine, Steve Marsar, who is a battalion chief on the FDNY currently. I met Steve a few years after 9/11, and he shared his experiences with me. See, Steve was scheduled to work that day, September 11th, but needed the day off, so he traded shifts with one other firefighter. Unfortunately, Steve's entire engine company, including the man that traded with him, perished. I often wondered how Steve has handled that over the years, and in true fashion, he told me that he doesn't dwell on it, but I think if it was me, it'd be hard for me not to. I pray that God will constantly wrap his arms around Steve and bring peace to all those. And as I gazed across and stared into the cascading water of where one of the towers stood, I wonder what was going through the minds of those brave men as they waited for their orders to climb the towers. I believe that they knew that they were going into hell to do battle with the devil. I believe that they put aside their fears, they grabbed their equipment, and with extreme courage headed into the unknown. There are two verses in the Bible that I've grown to love and that I feel represents the fire service as a whole, but truly sums up the actions of the responders that day. I visualize each firefighter hearing this verse as he looked up at the towers, burning, knowing that there were people still in there. That verse is Isaiah 6:8. Then I heard the Lord's voice saying, "Who can I send? Who will go for us?" So I said, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." And as I see the second towers or the towers crash, the second verse that I'm reminded of is John 15:13. The greatest love a person can show is to lay down his life for his friends. That is exactly what those responders did. Before the towers crashed and they surrendered their lives to the Lord, over 25,000 people were evacuated to safety. That brings me back to the piece of steel that we brought back. For so many of us, the events of 9/11 are burned into our memory from the images that we saw on television. It is my hope that by bringing back this historical artifact back to Battle Creek, we'll allow people to actually see something tangible. I hope that it will stir different emotions for each person that looks upon it and helps them to never forget. Most of the children that are in school right now were either too young to remember or were not even born. We owe it to those that perished to teach future generations that day, to never forget the personal sacrifices that were made, and to teach them how the country put aside our differences to rally around each other in a time of crisis. I'd like to leave you with these final thoughts. Never pass up a moment to tell your spouse and your children that you love them. Don't wait for experiences to happen. Go out and experience life to its fullest. Always trust in God and love unconditionally. If we can do that, I believe that we'll be honoring those that perished 15 years ago. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Chief. My personal heroes are our Gold Star families, those who have lost a loved one in combat preserving our freedoms. If anyone has a right to be bitter, they do. However, they are military's strongest supporters, and their love of country is unwavering. Miss Sherry Swan will now honor our Gold Star families and Brad Horn.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to this. I do this every year. I had a conversation with Kathy Horn. She lost her 22-year-old son. He was on the 89th floor of the World Trade Center, the Tower 1. He was hit instantly by the first plane. This was his first day on the job, just graduated from college. He was there talking to his mother on the telephone and said to her, "Mom, I've got to go. I love you." That's the last time she ever talked to Brad. I grew up out at Gull Lake, where Brad and his family were at. We spent many summers doing things. Brad had the most beautiful smile. He was not in the military, but he was an innocent victim of what happened on 9/11. So I always say to everyone when they ask about Brad, remember a prayer and remember to say, "I love you" to someone sitting next to you, a friend, a family member, or whatever. But it's very important to remember this. Remember the good memories you had with all of your family members. Remember our vets, remember our first responders, our law enforcement, and please keep that in your thoughts and prayers. And this pushed me to write a sonnet on Brad's life. And so it's called A Young Life Lost. On 9/11, 15 years ago today, when wings of death set the Twin Towers ablaze, a youthful Michigander passed away on television while the nation gazed. Brad Horn's promise had seemed unlimited, but fate belied his life's ambitious dreams. Americans admonished, filled with dread, discovered fear, evildoers' schemes. The country learned from this harmless hand. Our dream to live in peace was lost that day. The land of opportunity demands. Success and freedom seem to be far away. As each year passes, Brad's brave family asks you to remember he and his family in his prayers, and God bless America, and God bless everyone that's here today. Now, also, we want to remember the Gold Star flag families that we have been working with. They're totally dedicated to their children were lost in 9/11. We have several that we want to remember. We want to remember Gabriel Drew. He was in the U.S. Army. We also had James Hansen, who was in the U.S. Air Force. But let's remember, everybody, these people are local. So God bless America, and God bless everyone that's here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm proud to say that since 9/11, our brave men and women of the military have secured our borders and prevented future attacks on American soil. However, not without the loss of brave men and women serving our nation and our community. We must never forget their sacrifice and bravery, remembering our local heroes. Please welcome to the podium Emmett Township Supervisor and Marine veteran Tim Hill, who will present the military response.
Thank you, appreciate that. First, I want to thank everybody out here that decided to come to this memorial today and really think about and ponder on what happened on 9/11. I'd like to thank Sherry and Gordon for putting this on. They've been doing it for such a long time, and they finally roped me into doing a little speech, so I appreciate it, Sherry. Where are you? Oh, back there. Just the logistics alone to get everybody up on stage has got to be pretty much of a nightmare to get us all together. So thank you, Gordon and Sherry, for all your hard work over the years, and we really appreciate it. I also want to thank the police, the men and women of our fire department and our police department, also the first responders. They've done such a great job over the years, and I just want to really thank them. And please, if we can give a hand out to them, that'd be really great. Thank you very much. And last, I'd like to thank my son out there who's in the Marines. He's in Camp Pendleton right now. He's a military police officer. So if he just happens to be on the internet, and I just want to say, Josh, I love you, son, and do a good job. Today, for every one of us in the world, September 11th, 2001, changed our way of life. On that day, many of us were just going about our daily lives. We're going to work, stopping at the local coffee shop, or taking our children to school, or changing shifts from the night shift to the day shift. That day will ring forever in our memory for this generation. Just as December 7th, 1941, and the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and with that generation long ago, they went to war for many years and gave their lives for fighting for freedom, liberty, and our way of life. On September 11th, 2001, many on that day discovered within their character what freedom truly meant to them. Many firefighters, policemen and women, first aid responders, and everyday citizens, and even our men and women in the military dug deep within their character and discovered what kind of anger and frustration that would lead them to the deep resolve of justice and eventual payback. And boy, did our men and women of the United States military pay them back dearly. On that day, our sons and daughters, husbands and wives, co-workers, friends, and many of us here today had that deep resolve, and we signed up to fight. Many were prior service and had already served their country, but still, even though they moved a little bit more slowly and had a little creak in their back, they still were willing to fight and defend our precious way of life. On that day when the Islamic terrorists cowardly attacked our nation, our way of life, our children, our wives, our neighbors, our very existence turned upside down. Freedom to worship, freedom for speech, of life, liberty, freedom to our great honorable military, that freedom was viciously attacked on that sunny day in September. So today, after many years and many attacks, the United States has yet again shown the world what it will do when an enemy attacks. And yet, after many attempts against our way of life, 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we still remain one of the most powerful and best places to live in the world today. So today, standing here, every one of us are here to remember the fallen, our children, our wives, our husbands, fathers, our mothers, and our neighbors, and even our bosses. We remember them and mourn, and we ask, as we look at our family pictures, remembering our loved ones, or as we weep at the grave sites of our husbands and wives and our sons and daughters, there's no words, nothing can justify the attacks on September 11th, 2001. Thank you, and God bless America.
As I thought about what I'd say today, I was taking a walk this morning prior to the sun coming up. And 15 years ago, this day, I was just getting off a midnight shift working for the county. And on my walk this morning, the weather this morning was almost identical to this day 15 years ago. As I walked, it brought a tear to my eye to remember the 60-plus law enforcement officers that died that day in the line of duty serving others. Law enforcement personnel continue to serve others on a daily basis. And even this past year and a half, when we have not always gotten good press in the media and have had a few law enforcement officers make bad choices, but the 900,000 plus uniformed law enforcement officers in this country go to work on a daily basis. The men and women put their uniform on to serve the public across this country. And for those 60 plus that died 15 years ago, and those almost 2,000 that have died in the line of duty since September 11th, 2001, I say thank you. I had to speak at a funeral yesterday for the death of one of my employees. And I came across a quote that I think represents law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, first responders, military. And it's from Albert Pike. And what we do, what we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and the world remains and is immortal. The life that those men and women, September 11th, 2001, gave will always be remembered. Their sacrifice, the firefighters, EMS, law enforcement will be immortal, and we must always remember the sacrifice. And even now, on a daily basis, those men and women in uniform, if you see an officer, a firefighter, EMS, military, reach out your hand with a smile and say thank you for your service, because I am blessed with 196 faithful employees at the sheriff's office, and we have great law enforcement within the city, Emmett Township, State Police, Albion Marshal here in Calhoun County, Tribal Police. Say thank you. It goes a long way, and we don't always hear it. With that, I would also say God bless you, God bless the people of Calhoun County, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Part 4 is our EMS response. EMS responded in more ways than we can only imagine during 9/11. And like our public safety personnel, they too serve us 24/7, 365 days a year. Please welcome to the podium a professional EMS for more than 31 years and the 4th District County Commissioner, Mr. Steve Frisbee.
Thank you. On behalf of my colleagues on the County Commission, including Chair Derek King, welcome today.
but mostly on behalf of the medical first responder, the emergency medical technicians, paramedics, and the healthcare professionals, an extra welcome. Recently, ESPN aired a special by Tom Rinaldi, and I hope some of you caught it. It caught my eye, and it caught my ear, and it caught my heart. And you're wondering, well, what does something on ESPN have to do with EMS? Well, let me tell you about Wells Remy Crowther. It started off with, what would you do in your last hour of your life, and who would remember you? What would you do in your last hour of your life, and who would remember you? Wells Remy Crowther made sure he'd left his mark, and his impact will never be forgotten. His actions of a signature red bandana left an indelible mark in this world. His red bandana appeared as a 6-year-old as a gift from his father, and he kept it all through his life. As soon as he was eligible at 16 years old, he joined the Empire Fire Department's junior firefighter program and began training, which included medical training. He probably never knew how defining that training would become at the end of his life. Wells was a high school hockey and lacrosse player and went on to play Division I lacrosse at Boston College. He was described as an undersized, physically small player, but oversized in his commitment and desire. His red bandana was remained his signature style throughout his life, even through college, and even to the end. After graduation from Boston College, Wells became an equities trader on the 104th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. He later informed his father that he really wanted to become a New York City firefighter and was going to give up his career. Either way, as an equities trader or a New York Fire Department member, I believe God would have had Wells in that World Trade Center on September 11, 2011. At his desk in the South Tower, he knew the North Tower had suffered a catastrophic event. He called and left a message with his mother informing her he was okay. And then a few minutes later, United Flight 175 hit the South Tower. Wells found the stairs and informed everyone with authority and accuracy to stand up and follow me. Just what you're taught in a disaster. Stand up if you can and follow me. They did, down the stairway. He led survivors from the 78th floor down to the 61st floor, where he was met by incoming New York City Fire Department members. Instead of taking the elevators down to safety and evacuating the building, Wells returned up the stairs to assist other citizens with evacuation. His actions were confirmed by survivors who recognized Wells by his red bandana and later told their stories to New York City media. He actually returned a third time, but never made it out before the South Tower collapsed. Wells's body was found 6 weeks after the collapse of the World Trade Center in the lobby of what was the South Tower. He was surrounded by several uniformed firefighters when he died that day. As stories from survivors became public, several mentioned the man with the red bandana who had led them to safety. They all credited Wells with their survival. In 2006, Wells was posthumously named a member of the New York City Fire Department. And in the same year, a Boston College teammate wore a red bandana while competing in the Winter Olympics as a snowboarder. Strength, honor, and courage is what that teammate indicated those symbols were of the red bandana. Wells was a true hero. Boston College now hosts an annual red bandana run. The world is full of heroes like Wells Remy Crowther, and they stand among us, many here today. Today is a day of remembrance, and I implore you to always remember those who not only were murdered that day, but those who survived. Husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, who were all witness to one of the most heinous acts of our lives. They were there to find the survivors, and yet worse, to find the fallen, like Wells. Those events will never leave their mind. Please pray for their peace and comfort as well, those who perished in a field in Shanksville or at the Pentagon, as well as at the World Trade Center. Symbols like the red bandana or Todd Beamer's Let's Roll. Who remembers Todd Beamer's Let's Roll from the flight that crashed in Shanksville? It can continue to inspire our great nation into action and serve as a reminder. What would you do in the last hour of your life? Wells Remy Crowther by all accounts, never hesitated and laid his life down to help others. We as a nation have suffered greatly since 9/11 with losses of our military men and women. We mourn their deaths and offer our sincere debt of gratitude to their families, especially Gold Star mothers. God bless all of you, and God bless our great nation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium Dr. Bazan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come join you today. This is indeed an honor for me to share this occasion with you. I wanted to thank you all for being here. I wanted to thank all of our participants and Sherry and Gordon for putting this together for us. When something truly catastrophic happens, it seems like we always remember where we were and what we were doing. Those of you who are old enough to remember the shooting of John F. Kennedy probably remember exactly what you were doing that day. And same thing it was with 15 years ago with the World Trade Center coming down. That morning, I was in an operating room. We got started around 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had gotten my first couple cases out of the way. I was going out to the waiting room to collect family members to tell them that their youngster is doing well, and we were all done with surgery and just in the process of recovering when I noticed several of the nurses gathering around a television. They were staring, speechless, obviously deeply concerned with whatever was going on the TV that morning. And someone explained to me that it was reported that a small plane had crashed into one of the upper floors of the World Trade Center that morning in Lower Manhattan. I began watching the video, and the video that was shown was not that of a small plane approaching the building, but that of a large commercial airliner. And this made me question the assumption as to whether this was an accident or a suicide. And then minutes later, when another commercial airline crashed into the other World Trade Center tower, I was stunned to realize that America itself on American soil was again under attack. Everyone watching the television was shocked and overwhelmed with grief, wondering who could commit such a heinous crime. I had to go back into the operating room and concentrate on the next operation as the horrific events of the day continued to unfold. Upon completing the rest of my surgery, I learned that a third plane has crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and another hijacked plane was crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And by the end of the day, our casualties numbered 2,979 innocent Americans killed on American soil. Suddenly, we were all vulnerable all over America. Before the Twin Towers collapsed into piles of rubble, the police, fire, and emergency medical personnel from all branches of service pitched in. At the Pentagon, we had Air Force and Army and Navy, and even the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, personally pitching into that recovery effort. According to a well-researched article in the September issue of the Atlantic magazine written by Stephen Brill, rescue efforts were hampered by communication problems. He wrote, quote, 121 firefighters perished when the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. Supposedly, this was because police commanders, whose helicopters had the best view of how damaged buildings were unable to communicate with fire commanders to warn them to get their people out. Amid the chaos, emergency rescue personnel bravely continued putting their own lives in danger to rescue as many survivors as possible. These heroes that rushed in executed our national will. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and his staff were nearly trapped in his command post when the second building began to fall down. Mr. Brill's article, entitled, Are We Any Safer?, contrasted the mindset of Americans on September the 10th and September the 12th, 2001. He pointed out that on September 10th, 2001, then Attorney General Ashcroft rejected an FBI request to increase anti-terrorism personnel for the coming year beyond a fraction of the Bureau's own overall staff. Also, on December the 10th, FBI officials declared at a congressional briefing that the most imminent domestic terrorism threat was from animal rights activists. He later wrote concerning attitude after 9/11, have we succeeded in toughening up what overnight became known as Homeland Security? Absolutely, but not without a series of extravagant boondoggles along the way. Our defenses have been hardened against a large orchestrated attack like 9/11, but with the rise of the Islamic State, we are still vulnerable to less ambitious, so-called lone wolf terrorism. FBI Director James Comey stated, the shooter in San Bernardino said that he was doing this in the name of the Islamic State, and that changed everything. Nowadays, our new threats include biologic attacks, air and port security and safety, dirty bombs, as well as cyber terrorism. I had the opportunity to see the World Trade Center several times because I have a son who lives in New York City. The extent of the wreckage was almost beyond belief. I've been told that the financial cost of the 9/11 attacks amounts to $3.3 trillion, and that's 1/5 of our current national debt. We've spent $7 million for every dollar that Al-Qaeda spent planning the attack. In some ways, it's a shame because I would have loved to have had those resources to spend money on domestic spending, our roads, transportation, education, seniors, healthcare. However, we should never forget the slogan, freedom isn't free. Even to this day, some of our personal liberties continue to be infringed upon, such as our TSA security screening at airports. But that must be evaluated in light of the threat of terrorism that represents the threat in America today. We must always honor the memory of our Gold Star mothers, and that's why we are gathered here today. As a veteran, I felt personally violated by 9/11. I gave 11 years of service to this country in the military, attaining the rank of lieutenant colonel, as the colonel said. If anything good can be said of 9/11, it is the unity and patriotic pride that followed that tragedy. And sometimes it takes a tragedy of that nature to get that unity. For a time, there weren't Northerners or Southerners. There weren't Republicans or Democrats. We were all Americans. And over the last 15 years, we have returned to normalcy. But I am confident that if the occasion should ever arise again, our proud, patriotic people will again unite and answer the call. I am proud to be your state representative. I am proud to be an American. God bless the state of Michigan. God bless the USA. Thank you.
As we remember all those we lost on that day and the Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the wars that followed, we must strive to carry forward their legacy on this Patriots' Day. We take up their unfinished work and pay tribute to their lives with service and charity. Through these acts and quiet gestures, we can honor their memory and reclaim our sense of togetherness.
It's hard to believe that it's been 15 years. Our lives forever changed. And I know I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, not every one of us can be firemen, policemen, first responders. Not all of us can serve our country in the military. One thing we can always do as Americans is be proud. Be proud to stand for the national anthem. Be proud to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Be proud to say that we're Americans. And so as we sing this song, it's been 15 years, but we can sing this song every day in our minds. And just be glad and proud to be Americans. So I thank you all for being here, and feel free to join me.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause that flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, oh, and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, hey, that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt we love this land. God bless the USA.
AccessVision, your voice, your community.